Okay, so like I said, your teacher is correct in the fact that you are going to have to um, factor this before you can actually worry about canceling things out and simplifying and all that kind of fun stuff. Um, yes, you are correct in that you keep change flip, and once you change it from division to multiplication, you would be able to box or whatever to multiply these things together. But when you're working on simplifying um, with these type of rational expressions, you want to get it as simple as possible, which means you have to factor it. Once you factor it and you figure out what makes up this piece and this piece and this piece and that piece, you can figure out what they have in common. And when they have it in common on top and bottom, you cancel it out. So we are going to have to factor first. This is going to be our easiest one to factor because it's got a leading coefficient of 1. There's nothing in front of it. You might remember like the big X that we used to do. So what I am going to do is I'm going to make kind of 4 boxes. And this is just in order to organize my stuff. I told you I was going to show you a different way to organize it than what she did. What she did, of course, is correct, but it's going to be a little bit difficult for you. This is going to go in the top box, this here. So everything kind of has its own box, as you can see. So this equation, or this expression right here, is what we're going to work with in this box. This equation is going to go in this box. And once we kind of figure out what the pieces of each one of these expressions are, then we can figure out what they have in common. Obviously, I'm drawing this really big to kind of just work with you on it. You could draw it much smaller on your paper if that works best for you. So I'm going to handle this one first. I don't know exactly what your professor wants to see, if they don't want to see the big X or what. I know it's the way that we taught you guys in high school, so I'm going to go ahead and do the big X. Remember on top we put a times c, being that this is ax squared plus bx plus c. And then on the bottom we put b. So a here, there's no number in front of the variable, so we assume that it's 1. C is negative 2, so 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And then b is the number in front of the variable by itself. Again, there's no number, so we assume that it's going to be 1. So I need two things that multiply together to negative 2 but add together to positive 1. Well, if we do positive 2 and negative 1, that multiplies together to negative 2, and it does also add together to positive 1. So what we're going to do is these two are going to be our pieces. Great, 2 parentheses. The front is what multiplies together to get this. So it's just y and y for this problem since we don't have anything in front of the y. And then we carry our 2 pieces over. So this piece right here is going to come down to this. So I'm going to go ahead and come down here for a second. And you'll notice that I'm kind of factoring before I do my keep change flip. You could do your keep change flip and then factor, that would be fine, but it's not going to get you away from factoring, unfortunately. All 3 of these, you'll notice that there's a number in front of your first variable. Leading coefficients. Anytime your leading coefficient is 1, the big X would work. If your leading coefficient is not 1, you're not going to be working with the big X. Now, we taught you guys, or the big X alone at least, back in Algebra 2, here, you talked about do the big X and then put it in the box and then go from here and da-da-da and this, that, and the other. Honestly, the best way to do this is to figure out the factors of your first term. Well, 3. The only 2 factors of 3 are 3 times 1. Figure out the factors of your second term, 6. Well, you could do 2 times 3, or you could do 6 times 1. Both of those things give you 6. And really, it's just going to be trial and error. And I know that really sucks to kind of hear. But as you perform trial and error on things like this, and what I mean by that is just plugging things in, seeing if it multiplies to get the original piece or not. And if it does, great, you've got the answers. If it doesn't, then switch things around. It builds a number sense. Eventually, you'll kind of figure out, hey, I can't have these two things multiplied together. There's no way it's going to work. So up front, to get 3y squared, the only two things that multiply together to get 3 are 3 and 1. So we know that one of these is going to be 3y and that one of them is going to be y. Because they're the only two things that can multiply together to get you 3y squared, which is what they would need to multiply together to give you. So now, I'm going to take these four numbers, this pair and this pair, and I need to just kind of play with them in my mind to see what's going to come out when I multiply and give me this. So I'm going to swap into a pencil real quick because trial and error, you might plug something in and not work. So I'm just going to start with the 2 and the 3. And I'm just going to plug in 2 and plug in 3. Now I know they have to multiply together to give me negative 6, so one of them has to be negative. So I'm going to try just putting the 2 negative and the 3 positive. I know you can barely see this on the camera, but it's there. So either in my head or on a sheet of paper, you're going to multiply these two factors together and see if they give you the original piece. Well, 3y times y is 3y squared, so that's good. Negative 2 times positive 3 is negative 6, so that's good. I need to figure out if when I multiply the outsides and the insides and combine what I get, if it gives me negative 7. So 3y times positive 3, that is 9y. Negative 2 times y is negative 2y, so 9y and negative 2y, that gives me 7y, positive 7y. That's not what I want. I want negative 7y. Okay, so these would not be the factors. The first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to try just swapping the signs because it gave me the right numbers. So that makes me think that maybe these numbers are right and maybe I just have the wrong signs. Maybe they're just in the wrong order. So I'm going to swap the signs. You can see now that the 2 is positive and the 3 is negative. I'm going to try it this way. Still 3y squared, still negative 6, but let's work here. 3y times negative 3, that's negative 9y, okay? Then positive 2 and y is positive 2y. So I've got negative 9y plus positive 2y. Well, that is negative 7y. So now that this whole thing works out, I know that these are my factors. So while trial and error, as you can see, takes a little bit of time, it's going to build a number sense that is going to make things go a little bit faster. So the issue with what we've taught you is obviously, and I don't blame you, don't think I'm, being shady. It's not something you easily remember. Whereas trial and error, it's always just plugging things in, and there's no like little trick to remembering it. It's just plugging things in. You never forget how to just plug things in. So we're going to try this one again, or this one as well. 2. Well, that's 2 and 1, and that's it. Nothing else multiplies together to 2 and 1. So we know that up front, it's going to end up being 2y and y. Because those are the only two things I can multiply together to get 2y squared. In the back, we've got 9. So that's 9 times 1, or 3 times 3. So we're going to have to just, exact same way that we did here, we're going to plug things in, just figure out what works. I'm going to stick with the 3 times 3. I'm going to try that first because to me, I already know that multiplying something by 9 is going to get a big number, and I'm kind of sticking here. So I might be wrong, but that's kind of the thing with trial and error is you got to try to kind of think a step ahead. So I'm going to try 3 and 3. I know they need to multiply together to negative 9, which means one's going to have to be positive, one's going to have to be negative. I'm just going to try this. Positive and the negative, and we'll see if it works. 2y times y, well that's 2y squared, so I'm good. Positive 3 and negative 3, that's negative 9, so I'm good. So let's check and see if we can get the middle term. 2y times negative 3 is negative 6y. Positive 3 times y is positive 3y. Negative 6y plus positive 3y is negative 3y. So we got lucky on this one, and right off the bat, we found it. So carry it in. Last one. We're doing the same thing. 2, the only two things that multiply together to get 2 are 2 and 1. 3, the only two things that multiply together to get 3 are 3 and 1. So we know for a fact that we're going to have 2y and y, and we know for a fact we're going to have 3 and 1 in some capacity. We just might not put it in the right spot right off the bat. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to try 3 and 1. Well, they have to multiply together to -3, so I'm going to try just putting a positive here and a negative here. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, the first thing I'm going to try is swapping these signs. If that still doesn't work, then I'll work on swapping the numbers. Okay? 2y times y is 2y squared. 3 times -1 is -3. So let's test for this middle. 2y times -1, well, that's -2y. 3 times y, that's positive 3y. So we've got -2y plus 3y. That does give me positive y. So again, got it right off the bat. The great thing about trial and error is you kind of eventually start figuring out how things get put together and what's going to work and what's not going to work before you actually even write it down. All right, so I have successfully factored, which is probably the hardest part of this problem specifically. If you look at this before you even keep, change, flip, you see these two things show up on top and bottom. These two things show up on top and bottom. That means that they can automatically go away at that point. Now, I'm not crossing over. I'm not going to see anything about like what shows up here and here. But if it shows up in the same fraction on top and bottom, go ahead and get rid of it. There's no reason for you to have to deal with all that. Nothing else is that way, so now I'm going to go ahead and keep, change, flip, or multiply by the reciprocal, which is really what you're doing. Multiply, so we're changing from division to multiplication, and reciprocal meaning the flip, so that's where this actually comes from. So I'm going to keep my first fraction, change to multiplication, and flip the second fraction. All right, we're good. Once we multiply, and you kind of had the idea of going ahead and putting everything together once we multiply, we can actually, my lights just went off, I'm sorry. And you know I'm not getting up to move and change that. Once I multiply, I'm looking for, again, things that show up on top and bottom, the same way that I did here, because if it shows up on top and bottom, I can get rid of it, now that everything's kind of pushed together in one. So I'm going to go ahead and move up so you can actually see this. Maybe not that far. There we go. 3y plus 2, that doesn't show up on bottom. 2y plus 3, that shows up on bottom. So since it shows up on top and bottom, let's get rid of it.
Miss Marty?
Yes?
Have you seen Dr. Loggins?
I have not.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, of course, as soon as I'm trying to record a video for you, they call in asking me where Dr. Loggins is. Why would I know that? Whatever. This is what's left on top. This is what's left on bottom. There is nothing further for you to do, and you are done. So I know obviously that it looks like it takes forever, okay, but you get better as you go, and obviously without me talking you through every step, it goes a little bit quicker, but you're gonna have to factor. My best thing for you is to really, really get used to having to this trial and error, okay? It's going to build a number sense. It's going to help you in the long run, as opposed to what we do in high school when we just give you all the little tips and tricks and you don't actually ever remember anything.